DREAMBINGER.
Okay, let's go.
All we had to do is
So, this is the start of my work trip to New York City, where I am the videographer for this new and upcoming YouTube star.
Does this look like an easy mark to you, buddy?
I'm kind of into atmosphere and immersion and jogging, so...
3 books in a row now I've confidently judged by their ability to describe the rain. Quote, "Sometimes it poured down in such thick sheets of water that earth and sky seemed merged in one gray wetness." End quote. By the way, I call my dog Spoiler because when people come over, he gets so excited he barks and barks and can't stop. I have to put him in a room for a few minutes until everyone has gotten to know one another, and then he can come out and sniff and lick and be petted. He's in his room now. No two people are the same. As much as Maxine is Joe Dirt against religion, as much as Big Smoke is Zeus in his own game against the man, as much as, I don't know, Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh is Jiminy Cricket revived by the spirit of American consumerism, or taking things in. These characters surely interlace and rely on one another, but they come to life and die themselves uniquely. I only ask, if we cannot compare one character with the next, preferably dead or fictitious, how can we ever learn? I suppose in this sense the character is a complex symbol, and the character's motive, which always implies another character, is the most complex universal symbol, assuming everyone has got on their humanity hat. We might do well to pause here and think on that question. What would we know at all without the presence of a few loved ones' beings? But we can't quite go about studying one another's beings, can we? It's quite the thorny path, obscure, mystic, and hostile. By all means it's possible, but far be it for me to look at a few loved ones in my life and write entire books on the coalescence of their motives. No, although in the hands of someone like Byron or Rousseau and even Goethe at his most egotistically sublime, our subjectivity can balance the objective and offer a magnificent view of the world from a certain real person's eyes. For the most part, were we to synthesize the style and meaning of our friends with one another, we would cause harm. I don't know how exactly, all I know is that when I think about characters or people that are dead, I have all the freedom to say, he was this, she was that, when together, they were this. But when I say the same things of someone alive, I want to resign myself to solitude. Whether the person is present or not, I think I sense something quite shameful talking about anyone but the one person before me. Unless I'm with my wife. Maybe it's because conversation can be so easily butchered, and although with friends we learn a lot by the glimmers of their thoughts on other friends, at what cost? We all know the harm of playing too much the psychologist. At the very least, let what we discover in reading be the study of the manifest ways in which opinion ingrains itself in the psyche. Let the 3 characters that have recently occupied my mind, Achilles, Queequeg, and Okonkwo, plus all my daddies and granddaddies, be the model examples of such humane exposure, since by each of their brilliantly savage rages against the universe, my stubborn argument has been forged. We are the amalgamation of all we have consumed and all the things those things before us consumed. And I don't see how I can read a book that moves me to see my father and grandfather in lights more brilliant and dim and not share with others how they might also reap. So much for an apologetics of character. Now a thing or two about culture's edge. Somewhere in Achebe's Things Fall Apart, between the alligator peppers and the cola nuts, the sweet yams, and the story of the turtle taking to the sky and fooling the birds by calling himself all of you, somewhere alongside protagonist Okonkwo's disappointment in his lazy father, and then his own downfall of working too much and beating his wives and children and getting red eyes as the result of pent-up anger and the uncomfortability when alone, somewhere here, in the beauty of these Nigerian villages where no tree, crop, or other body, dead or alive, is taken for granted, all attention is paid. Somewhere in this very real magic I wondered, How can we possibly do any of this beauty justice other than holding it close, rereading it, forwarding a few of its words, maybe writing just a few in response, and then going on being a good boy?
What did you say?
There are so many cultures in this world, teeming with life and death and celebration and art, that if we merely pointed out things here and there, connected a few dots to show that we are also human, that would be a good start. For example, even the brave men of Umuoifa fear the dark. Quote, a snake was never called by its name at night because it would hear. It was called a string, end quote. I don't think I could find an author who gets away with setting up a weightier exegesis in fewer words. Do not mutter the thing's name, they say, the snake especially, at night. Now tell me, young one, what do we know about strings? Nay, theories. Things Fall Apart is filled with such curiosities and cultures. The moon and the crickets are meaningful, and of course there are some men that don't much think so. Most men are so natural that, says Oscar Wilde, they can't see beauty. Model men of this sort are Achilles, Queequeg, Okonkwo, my daddy, and my granddaddy. But I'm not quite ready to subject them to the indiscriminate white line of synthesis. I sometimes wish nature could hear me. In Umuoifa, the main Nigerian village in Things Fall Apart, moonlight nights are lived differently than moonless nights. Children sing, old folks remember their youth, and, as the Igbo say, when the moon is shining, the cripple becomes hungry for a walk. Like Hemingway, but a little more open. Achebe writes clearly and to the point, and when it is time to describe something beautiful, he isn't afraid to extend the simple sentence, and when it's time to show two characters talking, he does, they speak, and the meaning of life, as it often does when we're walking and waking and moving or watching a good movie, seems to rumble underneath. The reader that reads the first few pages will be convinced this is the real story. When you couple all the things said so far with the fact that according to some Umuoifian laws, cocks are sacrificed to the god of yams, the king of crops, a man's crop, and in our story a young woman recently was killed by a neighboring tribe, but the oracle must be consulted before war, but not necessarily listened to if the war is just, it is almost quite the shame I have shaken my booty for the ancient Greeks so long and have almost missed my closer elders. I might have cuddled with a strong New Zealand harpooner, the best of the savagely best, but I've missed out on a lot of cola nuts and alligator peppers. Quote, fear of failure and weakness for Okonkwo, Achilles, Queequeg, Granddaddy, was deeper and more intimate than the fear of evil and capricious gods and of magic, the fear of the forest and the forces of nature, malevolent, red in tooth and claw, end quote. Sounds like a personal problem, buddy. You deal with your trauma yet, big guy? Myself, I might as well take this time to say that neither my father, his father, or my papa, mother's father-in-law, are religious, or were. Mainly my grandmothers are in secret, or were. Where Okonkwo quite differs from me is that he hated everything his father loved, mainly, quote, gentleness and idleness, end quote. One of Okonkwo's sons begins to show signs of insipid laziness, however, and, quote, Okonkwo sought to correct him by constant nagging and beating, and so Umuoifa was developing into a sad-faced youth, end quote. This is what happens when we synthesize someone's character for them. Thanks, Daddy. If instead we synthesize characters of a higher ethereal order, dead or fictitious, maybe then with the loved ones, we might be a little more keen to notice when one of us is being too silly or mean. I don't want to be understood as saying we should never correct or examine one another's lives, but if we're going to do this, we surely must be thorough examiners of ourselves and those before us as well.
One last thing.
We're still setting the scene. Things have fallen apart, haven't you heard? Why should the essay be as straightforward and dry?
Good choice.
Let's read an extended quote, if only to contrast the ascetic Gothic beauty of every tarnished, self-flagellant enjoyer and villager of Umuoifa with the mothering beauty of prayer or confession in whatever form. I probably could not have come to this bleak view of manhood had I not seriously marveled at the following passages' similarities to the Dark Souls franchise. Quote, the way into the shrine was a round hole at the side of a hill, just a little bigger than the round opening into a henhouse. Worshippers and those who came to seek knowledge from the god crawled on their belly through the hole and found themselves in a dark, endless space in the presence of Agbala. No one had ever beheld Agbala except his priestess, but no one who had ever crawled into his awful shrine had come out without the fear of his power. His priestess stood by the sacred fire which she built in the heart of the cave and proclaimed the will of the god.
The
fire did not burn with a flame, the glowing logs only served to light up vaguely the dark figure of the priestess.
So the world might be mended.
Why synthesize? Why trust prophecy?
So the
After
world
2 glasses
might
of
be
wine, and while they wait for the first wife to show up so the other wives may drink, Okonkwo's friend Obiako says there must be something behind it. There must be a reason for it. A toad does not run in the daytime for nothing. Our incessant need to apply reason to everything and also to believe in spirits. It's the main reason to pity Ahab that he says, "Hist then, how dost thou know that some entire, living, thinking thing may not be invisibly and uninterpenetratingly standing precisely where thou now standest? Aye, and standing there in thy spite." But proverb is met with proverb, and Obiako is called strange. Apparently, this young man, when the oracle said to him, "Sacrifice a goat to your dead father," he said, "Ask my dead father if he ever had a fowl when he was alive." And Okonkwo was the only one not to laugh, for in his mind he hears the other proverb. An old woman is always uneasy when dry bones are mentioned in a proverb. Words are met with words, thoughts with thoughts, in real life after work and sweat and dance and play, from villages next door and civilizations far away, animals and plants before us, animals and plants for all time. There is so much hearty allusion to the animal and things other people have said for millennia that things fall apart were it not for the violence would on principle be a pastoral. But violence is part of culture, as much as pain is a part of reality. It's culture's edge. Hell, I'm hardly escaping violence myself by synthesizing this beautiful Nigerian story with a Grecian and a New Zealandian and a mock American. What exactly culture's edge is, it's hard for me to say because I'm barely discovering it and unveiling it fully just now reading Achebe. I'll let him take the lead here when he relays that evening supper where Okonkwo and his friend Obierika are discussing the aftermath of a quiet white man being slain and his iron horse, bicycle, being tied to a tree. The elder Uchendu says they should have feared killing the quiet man, always feared killing the quiet man, not the loud. The young men somewhat agree, but are more taken up with the stories they've heard of white men inventing guns and strong drinks and transferring slaves. This fear follows a fable of a kite stealing a duck, and the elder ends story time by delivering one of the book's most profound lines. Quote, "There is no story that is not true," said Uchenda. "The world has no end, and what is good among one people is an abomination with others. We have albinos among us. Do you not think that they come to our clan or came to our clan by mistake, that they have strayed from their way to a land where everybody is like them?" End quote. In 4 lines we get the confirmation that all is true and nothing is true. The construction of the double negative here borders on litotes, as does the true on the false. Mercy and cruelty revolve around immortality, says the elder, and then it is put in an unanswerable rhetorical question to the younger whether the blood war is a result of someone who had already strayed, straying again in return. If this is not culture's edge, I apologize for trying to make this phrase happen, it is at least an overview of culture, which Achebe handles mightily. In fact, let's let him put the cap on the overview himself too, in this early passage that paints Umuoifa's natural brilliance in the wake of universal humanity. Quote, "Umuoifa Edzedu, who was the oldest man in the village, was telling 2 other men who came to visit him that the punishment for breaking the peace of Ani had become very mild in their clan. It has not always been so, he said. My father told me that he had been told that in the past, a man who broke the peace was dragged on the ground through the village until he died. But after a while, this custom was stopped because it spoiled the peace which it was meant to preserve. Somebody told me yesterday, said one of the younger men, that in some clans it is an abomination for a man to die during the week of peace. It is indeed true, said Umuoifa Edzedu. They had that custom in Obodauni. If a man dies at this time, he is not buried, but cast into the evil forest. It is a bad custom which these people observe because they lack understanding. They throw away large numbers of men and women without burial, and what is the result? Their clan is full of the evil spirits of those unburied dead, hungry to do harm to the living." End quote. I think it is time to face the music like Achilles faced the death of Patroclus, like Queequeg faced each whale and waking moment, like my grandfather moved away from his family and started his own. I think it's time to let my dog Spoiler out of his room. I've said enough and shown my personality enough where I can just look to the text, find a few words, and say, now we're talking. We've painted a broad enough stroke of this Nigerian village, but we have not scratched the surface on how complex some of its characters are, how profound and pitiful, how teeming with reality. So, let's synthesize or weave the traits and motives of others along the way, all in the name of improving our ability to connect the dots. Where should we begin? How long is it going to last? Let's just dive in, and with our one last breath, invoke what maybe should be every critic's mantra: how complex we are! How much happens within us and around us for us to go about claiming we know? Okay, I haven't jumped in yet. It's high up from here. The book is deep, man. Deep. Wait. I've jumped clearly and cleanly from the third story of a houseboat before, but still wonder why. And before that, as a teen, I broke my ankle by jumping from 10 feet onto the ground, so maybe I'm a little cautious on how I want things to unfold. It is deep, though. I admit I'm torn in reading my third novel from a different country this month by the idea that moving too much from one art to the next doesn't allow us to dive deep. But wait, it's deep, man. The water is deep, and I am still me. I won't be able to do Chinua Achebe justice fully, but not even the stellar H.C. Goddard fully did Shakespeare justice, and he wrote deep wells for essays for each of the plays. So just dive in. By all means, be afraid of the white line, but not the blue. Jump in! Go! Go! Bow! Bow! Bow!
One last thing.
Behold Okonkwo, as manly as the sternest grandfather we can imagine, barrel-chested, a renowned fighter in his prime, 3 wives, and, not counting the ones that died prematurely, a half a dozen kids whom he is proud of, the manlier they are, and the more they control women, even his daughters. Unlike his father, who was afraid of blood, on great occasions Okonkwo drank palm wine from the human heads he brought back in war. If I recall correctly, he has killed 5 men before the story begins. I cannot recall one scene in which he sits and consults his wife on anything, and maybe 2 or 3 times when he speaks to them angrily to consult where another wife is or the children, often proceeding to yell at them for something nature did, threaten to break their jaw, or actually ending up shooting a gun near them or beating them. Okonkwo was not the man to stop beating somebody halfway through, not even for fear of a goddess. On his respectable compound, he grows sweet yams and other vegetables and works all year building and re-preparing, and without work, barely gets through conversation. Quote, somehow Okonkwo could never become as enthusiastic over feasts as most people. He was a good eater and he could drink 1 or 2 fairly big gourds of palm wine, but he was always uncomfortable sitting around for days waiting for feasts or getting over it. He would be very much happier working on his farm, end quote. Earlier in the book, when Okonkwo is contradicted by a man who has no village titles, Okonkwo says, quote, this meeting is for men, end quote. The narrator then casts light on the village dynamic, the not-so-black and white Umuoifa fireside, where men of all types interpret the world differently, no matter the superstition that lingers in this particular corner of the world. Quote, Okonkwo knew how to kill a man's spirit. Everybody at the kindred meeting took sides with Osugo when Okonkwo called him a woman, end quote. The first main plot point involves Okonkwo taking in Ikemefuna, a boy from a neighboring village whom the oracle or masked spirit gods have decided is Okonkwo's burden. Soon enough, quote, even Okonkwo himself became very fond of the boy, inwardly of course. Okonkwo never showed any emotion openly unless it be the emotion of anger. To show affection was a sign of weakness. The only thing worth demonstrating was strength, end quote. In fact, as the book goes on and rage builds, we see how rare it is for Okonkwo to hold someone dear. Approaching the end of the first act, the oracles have decided again that this adopted son must be taken out of the village and killed, and although Okonkwo was warned not to go by a friend, he did, and, quote, as the man who had cleared his throat drew up and raised his machete, Okonkwo looked away. He heard the blow. The pot fell and broke in the sand. He heard Ikemefuna cry, "My father, they have killed me." As he ran towards him, Dazed with fear, Okonkwo drew his machete and cut him down. He was afraid of being thought weak. End quote. Life is complicated, and it almost seems silly to synthesize someone's life or character with another's when we realize that if we just fully hear someone's story, we can synthesize all we need later, on our own time, when the moment arises. Quote, Okonkwo did not taste any food for 2 days after the death of Ikamafuna. He drank palm wine from morning till night, and his eyes were red and fierce like the eyes of a rat when it was caught by the tail and dashed against the floor. He called his son Woe to sit with him in his obi, but the boy was afraid of him and slipped out of the hut as soon as he noticed him dozing. End quote. If I need to think of my daddy or granddaddy, if I need to help a son or grandson, moments like this revolve latently in my mind, like sparks that dim and brighten insofar as I maintain a cool head, see one beautiful thing a day, and again, continue to be a good boy.
What did you
I
say?
pause while writing, thinking, is this enough for a prolegomena on all future character study? And is this enough for a primer for things fall apart? And then I'm hit with the next quote. When did you become a shivering old woman? Okonkwo asked himself. You who are known in all the 9 villages for your valor in war. How can a man who has killed 5 men in battle fall to pieces because he has added a boy to their number? Okonkwo, you have become a woman indeed. End quote. Achilles, Queequeg, Big Smoke, my papa, what a reviving question. Who is your daddy and what does he do? Man. But I will not fight Okonkwo on this point. Without bringing in Achilles, Queequeg, and the rest of my daddies, and my mommies. Shoot, I even thought to mention that Tony Soprano, it must be nice to know everything, from his mother, and you go around and pity for yourself. From the hospitalization, this resembles Okonkwo's reaching for any saying in his head, no matter the argument, without bringing anything from outside the text, though there really is too much to say on colonialism, Chukwu versus Yahweh, the arts of the fable and the pastoral, the suffering of woman, eggs as a delicacy, locusts as welcome food, medicine men, mutilation in the evil forest, flapping breasts.
What?
Okonkwo's romantic side, he really peaked as a teen, rumor, rage, despair, the effects of exile and absolute oppression, the spiritual power of the white man's glasses, and much, much more, and things fall apart. I want to bring this in, but I can't, lest this essay actually derail or turn into a book. Suffice it to say that Okonkwo is his own man, as far as rage lets us be our own man. To the very end, on his own raging terms, and in his last act, he even seems to defy rage in claiming himself. Like McCarthy's disconnected Sutri, Okonkwo's end is one of those where, as the story of this man sits with us and we linger outside, maybe to let my dog Spoiler out, we can't help but feel like the cricket who spoke to the boy puppet felt. There is immense hope, and there is not.